Here on the Mosaic Arc, we talk a lot about poetry and writing poetry, and we also talk about how much we love our Lord Jesus Christ and his mother. And today, we have a very special guest who not only loves talking about poetry and his love for our Lord Jesus Christ and his mother, but is actually trained in writing poetry and has been a professor of creative writing, has written thousands and thousands of poems, and we are blessed to have him here tonight, all the way from Eastern Europe to talk with us about some of his poetry, and we hope give us some tips on how to write more beautifully about our Lord Jesus Christ and his mother. Welcome to the Mosaic Arc. Okay, we're here. Okay, what are you going to teach us? maybe, maybe,
Right from the
maybe we should
start.
tell people who you are, and you should tell them how you found me. So our guest
Okay.
today is Carl Winderl. You should say your name properly so that I know how to say it. And he found me some years ago, and so I can claim zero credit whatsoever. I think Our Lady sent you to us to help us. So
I agree.
she,
I agree.
we know when mom says do it, you have to, because she does, right? But anyway, welcome, Carl.
That's
Thank you
right.
so much for joining us. And if you could just tell everyone a little bit about how you found me. That let's keep it focused on us. No.
Okay. That's right. That's right. Well, thank you for having me. We all like to be selected, chosen, and I'm not sure how exactly, except that in the world of Marian scholarship and art, there are ways that we end up crossing paths. And I use the word crossing metaphorically. We are all here
Yeah.
because of the cross. Seriously. Okay. So I probably overdo that in some of my poetry. So the fact that I'm finally here, I've been watching what you've been doing. I'm here in Serbia. I'm in Belgrade. It's called Beograd. I like the way the Serbians pronounce it, so I'm going to call it Beograd. I'm not a local yet, uh, but I'm here, and I feel like I'm living the Pascal dream. I'm honored. I'm flattered to be here. We all know Blaise Pascal, mathematician, philosopher, physicist, quote machine. My favorite Pascal quote, translated from French and paraphrased by me in English, is: "A man is seldom so inspired as when he gets to talk about himself."
We really want you to talk about yourself just a little bit, just a little bit.
Okay,
So
well, maybe I
I said
overplayed.
you've been at I mean, he has a PhD in creative writing
Okay,
from New York University. So like this is you realize how unusual this is for us. We're simply amateur poets. Carl
oh, please,
actually has
please. All right.
accreditation and
Well,
practice
back in the day,
back in the
my
day.
first year of graduate school was at Chicago.
And there you go. We cross
That's
paths. Yes.
that's how it all started. And then I went to New York University, earned a PhD in creative writing, and along the way, in fact, the first poem that I wrote about Mary was written after I'd had a really good writing class with Richard Stern back in the day,
Mm.
an Immaculate Conception, which we might refer to later on, but it's the preface to one of my books. But that's where it all started for me, you know. But this whole idea about being inspired, I say it not flippantly because that's what I feel gets me out of bed in the morning. Every morning, I'm up around 6 o'clock or so, eat a light breakfast, start my day, and until about noon, I'm immersed in my writing process. I write every day. I wrote today. I wrote this morning. I wrote yesterday morning. I'll write tomorrow morning, even though it's Sunday. I'll write the day before, the day after. That's what I do. And the notion about using the Pascal quote is that I take inspiration very seriously. I mean, my twofold prong for me in writing poetry is one, I want to be inspired. And two, I want something about my poetry to be inspiring to those who might have a chance to read it. I mean, what greater calling do we have? I mean, one of my favorite E. Cummings poems, it's a little short one here. When God decided to invent the world, he took a breath bigger than a circus tent and everything began. I mean, Shakespeare talked about the soul of brevity, but you know, Cummings really did the deal. That's a 4-line poem. And that works for me because that's how the world started, with inspiration. What did God do with that breath? He started the world, but he breathed the breath of life into Adam. Inspirare, Latin for in, breathe. And so for me, if I don't have a day of writing, I feel like I missed out. I missed out on writing a poem. I missed out on having my time with the Trinity. I am blessed because I get to integrate my faith in my art. Every morning, I move my stuff over to another table. It's usually on this table over here. But I do the same thing every morning. I have a stack of books that I go through. I have my little rituals for getting started, and I just wait. I wait to be inspired, and hopefully something that I do will inspire somebody else, either through what they think or what they feel, or how the Catholics, as some of you know, have a very special phrase: "Ad Jesus per Mariam."
Yes.
Through Jesus, through Mary. You know, and that's what I feel I'm a part of that tradition there, is that I'm able to tune in to the things that I pick up through my readings. I have a stack of about 10 different books that range from the Bible, obviously, you know, C.S. Lewis, you know, I've got a Billy Collins, New Instructed Poems. I have a Dorothy Day book that I'm reading right now too. I have a stack of 10 books. And when I sit there, I pick up the top and I take a look at it and I read a page and I think about it and I put it down. I work my way through the stack. And at some point, no pressure, I get an idea. Or this morning, what I did was, am I still able to talk about how I do what I do?
Yes, we're just soaking
Please.
it in. We're soaking it in.
Okay.
I am. This is lessons for me. I need as a writer. So please.
Okay,
Well,
well,
and also I think so. If I may make footnotes just for a moment.
Good.
So,
Okay.
so one, you're talking about being inspired, and everyone is
Yes.
always, you know, it's like, where do you get your ideas and where they come from and stuff.
Right.
But you've done something. You're doing something very like sneaky and beautiful, which is you show up.
Yeah.
You've
Exactly.
described. I mean, we call ourselves Dragon Common Room, which is the big umbrella of the Telegram
Yes.
chat where we
Yes.
hang out with our friends who are there now, right? Hopefully watching.
I've
Hello,
been ranging
morning.
around through it, looking at the
Yes,
clever stuff you guys do.
but we're also the subgroup of those of us who've been writing together for several years now. Casey and Mel and I are now writing the act 4 of our long dragon poem, and
Yes.
we started with a larger group, but our practice has been the same throughout, which is show up regularly, right? And I
Yes.
say you've already done your writing on your time frame for you, right? Because you've done morning already,
Yes.
but you are here
Yes.
with us in your tea time, which we started in the afternoons. We do it more in the evenings together now, but that the first lesson for inspiration is be there, right?
Yes.
Show up regularly. And it's beautiful the way you've described. It's like you get ready and that you're there in prayer regularly. And
Yes.
people are, the 19th century with its romanticism and its sort of, genius as inspiration. And so it makes everybody think that the inspiration is something that happens, um, you know, we just
A
happens,
light
right? And
switch.
if you,
Yeah.
well, no, we are actually thinking more of it as light switch. It's like, be there, sit down,
Yes.
you're there. And
Right,
That's
but
right.
I mean, what I like what he just said was that, yeah, you're going to sit there and wait for inspiration to come, but you're actually going to sit there. It doesn't mean it's going to come like that,
right.
but the fact that you're there, you're waiting for it, you're open to it, and then magical things can happen. But you have to actually be there. I like that.
Right, as
I
opposed to
mean,
people worrying, it's like, oh, I'll sit down when I get an idea, and it's like, no, 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 no,
Right,
no, sit
right. It
down.
might the idea might not come immediately. Sit down anyway.
Right. And then the obverse, of course, we've often experienced is when you've been doing the practice of sitting and constantly being there, then the ideas come in other times and other moments too. But it's
Mhm.
the beautiful monastic discipline of be there in the hours, and then the inspiration will come. It's yeah, it's lovely. So I'm glad you started with that, Carl, because it means
Mm.
that you verified my practice. See, a real
well,
poet does this. So there.
Yeah.
well, a real writer, this is what you do. I would tell all my students, you have to write every day. You have to do something with your art every day.
Yes.
Whether you're a painter, I was at NYU. I was in the creative arts department, so that means I wasn't with all those people who are learning to be stuffy old boring English professors over in humanities. I was in the creative arts department. You couldn't even find art. In fact, this was back in the 70s. I mean, this is so long ago that you uh, we were in classes with painters and photographers and sculptors and musicians and actors and writers obviously too. And one of the things that was drummed into our heads was whatever your art is, you do it every day.
Hmm.
You don't save it for Saturday morning for 8 hours. You don't pick Tuesday and Friday to be your work days.
Right.
If you're a writer, if you're an artist, you write every day. You write every day. It doesn't have to be 4 hours, 5 hours. Even if it's just 15 or 20 minutes or 30 minutes, keep it active, keep it current, be disciplined, make it on a. Okay, one of the metaphors I used to use with students, I would say, if you want to be struck by lightning, how do you make that happen?
Go stand where the lightning
Well,
is.
well, I don't know. You look for a weather forecast, and if there's going to be a thunderstorm in the area, you go run out and you try to find a puddle where there's water, and you take a golf club, preferably an iron, and you have some old golf shoes that have spikes in them, and you stand in the puddle and you put the,
I want to
the
die.
golf club as high up into the sky as you can to get struck by lightning. That's a metaphor. So for me, I don't have a golf club or a puddle here, but I have all my writing implements, and wherever I am, I can write. But where I like to write is at a place where I'm going to be for months. We have a home in San Diego and one in Corning, Western New York. I have a room that's dedicated to my writing. So my wife says, "Could you close the door to your writing room? We have company coming over," because I have books, papers scattered all over. When I get up in the morning, I get ready to write. I walk in the room. Everything's there the way I left it the day before.
Mhm.
I don't have to do any organizing. I don't do any disorganizing. It's all there. It wasn't like this when I was at Chicago, when I lived in the Broadview, down the street from the Museum of Science and Industry. I don't know if that's still a grad program there. That's where I lived when I was in grad school there.
The
I wasn't
Broadview is
that
it's the
disciplined.
big hotel, right? The big hotel building.
Yeah, it
No,
was the
no,
graduate.
we sold that because it was too
Sold
expensive
it.
to renovate again.
Uh,
Yeah,
Listen,
they sold the university sold it.
I was there in '73, so that's how old.
Yeah.
Wow, but it was a great
It
place.
was
Anyway,
these were these luxury hotels that were built when the South Side was kind of a Riviera destination, right? So
oh,
you were in
oh yeah, yeah,
the luxury hotel.
yeah. We were just right there down from the Museum of Science, the Bassans and everything. So, but it's taken me a while. It took me a few years to get to be that disciplined to realize to make it happen.
Right.
You know, I have a good friend, Bill Zildjian. You may have heard of him. He's the cymbal guy from rock and roll. One of the things that I learned from him a long time ago was he said, "Carl, there are no overnight sensations in rock and roll. People forget that the Beatles went to Hamburg and they played 8 hours a day. That's where they
mhm.
learned to play,
Yeah.
right? So there are no overnight sensations in rock and roll. And the other thing that Bill told me was, what doesn't happen overnight doesn't go away overnight. So the kinds of things that you do, that you practice and discipline yourself to do, they're not going to go away. Um, so I have one of these things hanging around here as well. I drop into serious meditation. But the other thing that I do is, my daughter gave me this. This is a journal that I carry with me. So can you see this? Okay.
Oh, lovely. Yes. You have to have
My daughter gave me-
writer's journal, because that's what you do when, if an idea hits, you write it down. And
because you can make a date with the muse. That's the best bet. But sometimes, as I used to still say, a writer is always at work. You're processing information.
always.
Yeah.
You are,
when I go to a movie, when I go to the theater, when I walk through a museum, the mind is working. I may not be writing a poem, but there's something going on and this is my small economy size one that I throw into a light bag. My daughter bought me this, and then she bought me this one. Ooh, I love this one. This is one of those moleskin guys. So you can see this is what happens. I have this with me. So this morning I started on a brand new poem. One came to me. It was about the Samaritan woman at the well. I've written about her before, but I had a new thought. Actually, I was flipping through my daughter's little journal here. I was just going around. I'd done through my stack a couple of times. So I went through this. So I did it. I wrote a poem. It's here somewhere. I'll hold her up. That is about the woman at the well. Something that struck me this time. I reread the whole thing, and it struck me that after Jesus gave her something to drink, she left very quickly, and she left her water jar. And that came to me, and I was like, I hadn't thought of this before. I thought of some other things that he did for her. And I thought she was so impressed. She left her water jar. And for me, art starts with the question, what if? Why? If you want answers, go to Britannica, go to Google, go whatever. But art starts with a question. So the question I asked myself is, why did she leave her water jar? And then it occurred to me, he gave her something to drink, but it was a metaphor. He was giving her water from the living spring of life that she would never be thirsty for before. That wasn't going to be put in a water jar. So what it occurred to me was, she left the jar because she didn't need it. And so the poem ends with Mary, who's the narrator of all the poems, obviously. The narrator who says, she left because my son gave her not what she wanted, but what she needed. She needed a draft of water springing up from the well that never runs dry. That jar was not going to be a help for her.
So what you're doing, I mean, from my perspective, it's like you're writing exegesis, you're writing commentaries on the scripture in this beautiful monastic Lectio Divina style, right?
Yes.
It's like it's formal medieval description that you sit there and you think you've got the text that you've read and that right? And you just saying right now with this story, this story. It's not that it's a new story to you, but you see things, you keep turning it and you see things differently and notice different details. And that's all of monastic commentary on scripture is like that. It's this, you've read this text many, many, many times in prayer, in the hours, and in your meditation, and each time you come to it, it reveals new depths. So they like saying things like the well of scripture is inexhaustible, and it's very, very simple, but then you notice this new thing that opens out into whole new streams of understanding. So when you're speaking there, I was thinking of in our opening credits, we have a picture of the altar piece at St. John Cantius, and Cantius, St. John, in his one sort of performative miracle is a girl breaks her it's a milk jug actually, but she breaks her jug and he fixes it for her. And when I first saw it, that painting, I like altarpieces of Our Lady holding her son. I like the classic pictures, right? And so I was much less impressed with St. John Cantius fixing a jug. And but the thing is, I've been going to mass there for several years now, and now I love that picture because that image of the broken jug that he helps fix is like core to what happens for us at mass, that we are we're broken and healed over and over and over again when we're there in the liturgy. And you're talking about her leaving her jug behind. I'm like, wait a minute, why would she leave her jug behind? And it plays out in all of those wonderful resonances. So
Yeah.
yes, you're confirming all of what I've been trying to tell them for years now, and much more succinctly than I have been able to. It's wonderful. We've got some comments saying in the chat. So Rick, welcome. Yeah, I mean, we haven't seen him in the comments before. Discipline is creative process. Yes, right. It's like this gorgeous monastic
Yes.
training. Mel is saying Carl Wendell gets it. Yes. Hi, Robert. Oh, so Robert has a question. Poetry regarding early church fathers writing, poetry versus ecstasy. You may have to explain that. How do we ground our contemplations in Christ without an orthodox Christology and the repetition of apostolic dogma and tradition? Yes, that I think maybe. So you've mentioned Dorothy Day. What other books do you have on your table that you're working off of? Because when I read your poems, and we're going to do that, we promise we're going to read some poems.
Okay.
I feel the connections that you're putting in one word, right? It's like that they shimmer out into all of these references, and so. I was surprised, actually. I would say Carl hunted me down and gave me poems, and I said no, because
No.
one, because you don't write in what we're trying to learn to do in Dragon Common Room, which is like meter and rhyme and things like that. You have a much more spare, more modern style, but it speaks to the way in which the fathers and the monks thought about scripture, which is in these references and resonances.
Okay. At some point, since you mentioned that I appear to be not using rhythm and rhyme and meter, and
we'll test it when we read them out loud.
I invoke the ghost of the Frenchman Blaise Pascal and say, au contraire, because many times on my lines there is enjambment. There's anaphora.
I've seen that. Yeah.
My rhymes are not end rhymes. My rhymes are initial, medial, accidental, incidental. I use all kinds of rhyming patterns that don't necessarily be, don't echo Shakespeare or Wordsworth.
We're beginners. You have to forgive us.
No, I don't say that.
No, but the thing is, when we talk about the poems that you've given us to read, let's show them this too, because I think the sort of precision of your art it's so delicate, and it's so there that if you're reading them as like, oh well, it doesn't rhyme, or if you gave it to Grok, right, say write this, right? Grok likes writing ballads. Rhymes.
So I've been invoking the writers from the past. Here's another one. Okay. Horace said in Latin, ars est celare artem. The art is to hide the art.
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
So what I'm doing with the enjambment and the allusions and the volta, all these things, they're in sonnets. I just put them in a little different package. The same thing with all the rhymes. When I recited the one God decided to invent the world, I didn't read it. It's lined out. It's the iambic pentameter. Mm-hmm. Well, I just, I made it more conversational. I probably owe my style or my familiarity with how I present the words on the page to having been raised on the King James Version of the Bible. Mm-hmm. When I was 10 years old, my Protestant grandmother gave me a red letter edition of the Bible. It was zippered. That's what all my cousins and we got that for.
The zipper matters. That's
the
cool.
Zipper. I loved it. But all of those, I obviously don't have it here. It was in columns. It wasn't across the page. It wasn't like prose.
Right. This is to show them. It's like that's how you lay out your poems.
Yes.
They're
yes.
You can just see it in
columns. 3, 4, 5 words,
yes.
2 words, or whatever. Okay.
So you're so medieval. That's the way colla et comata. You're writing in like medieval manuscript style. Perfect.
Did you call me medieval?
Yes.
I take that as a compliment.
Very good. You should.
I mean, we're all products of our experiences. I mean, I went to Chicago, and to be honest, I did not light up the academic scoreboard. To be honest, the writers who went there to write, Vonnegut, Philip Roth, Sandra Cisneros, Bello, the whole gang, Uh, I went there to learn how to write. I wasn't planning on going on for doctoral work.
Mm.
I like the ambiance. I like the aura. I like being in George Kent, Walter Blair's class, Stuart Jay's class. Richard Stern cracked me up. You know, his book that was really popular then was The Books in Fred Hampton's Apartment. Fred Hampton was a Black Panther guy. What the heck? What is Richard Stern writing about that for? But it was his writing poetry class that that really helped me a lot. Okay.
Hmm.
So I was blessed to be there. It was a great year. It really got me started. I took a few years off. I decided to go back east and teach in a college. And then after I decided that it was time for me to get more training, I went to NYU and that's where I got a PhD in creative writing. And here I am today, blessed to be talking, sharing, with you guys. It's so fun.
But so okay, so I know VA has to leave soon. She's talking about, so VA Boston is one of our writers. She writes stories,
Okay.
novels. Um, that she's saying flow is we're talking about like there's still the comments hold off from like it's like permanent chatter in the background.
Okay.
But when we were talking about how we get there with the inspiration, she's saying flow is a state you enter and you have to bring yourself to the door to walk through it.
Yeah, I like that metaphor.
Flow being that metaphor that he was at Chicago, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. Yeah, I hope I'm saying this right. He was in our psychology department and talked about this sort of being in the practice flow state for happiness.
Okay.
He was very helpful to me when I was writing my dissertation and realizing it's like you have to, what we've been talking about, you have to find that sort of moment of ecstasy. You've been practicing. And everybody always wants of course, the shortcuts to ecstasy, which is like take a pill, right? And what you were saying, your friend, your musician friend said, whom I forget, I don't know who he is.
Bill Zildjian symbols, think the symbols. Yeah.
Okay, that that it lasts if it doesn't happen overnight, right? It's the ecstasy of art is it grows and builds over your lifetime rather than being this one flash that you can get by not synthesizing, syntheticizing, making a synthetic high, right? That people are always wanting instead of this artistic high, which is patient and disciplined and just gets more and more beautiful over the years. Or VA says, or to keep with the metaphor, you have to come to the river before you can ride it. Mel will like that when she rides rivers. One thing, and this is still VA, one thing beginners need to learn is to set goals suitable for your current state in life. I can't count on 2 free hours with 2 little children. But I can edit 2 pages or write 500 words a day. Right. It's like to be there regularly rather than thinking, oh, if only I get this big block of time, I'll finally be able to write. It's like never. That never happens. You build up to being able to write in the big block of time, but you do it by having those little. Okay, so Robert is still, now we're thinking about the problem of the topic as opposed to the practice. Some bring a criticism that Catholics become overly ecstatic in art, both visual and poetically, risking a loss of focus on objective truth of Christ. Well, that's nonsense. but no, but that's, because we're actually talking about your poems have more structure and form in them, hiding the art than those who are not attuned to it will recognize. Right. If you're attuned to the art, you're going to see all of those moves that you're making. Just like when we were prepping to come on camera and you were worrying about the light and such, you're saying, am I okay there? Am I okay there? It's like you don't even notice these particulars until you've tried it yourself. And then it's like the experts make it, as you say, hidden, but on the other hand, you've brought it all into the light so beautifully if you know all of the skills. So yeah, the VA was saying, my poetry professor pointed out that good poems will often generate their own rhythm even if they aren't in a strict form. But I think, Carl, yours are actually incredibly strict, but you can be deceived by the way in which you've laid them out on the page into thinking that, although as you pointed out quite correctly, the page layout is actually a very precise form, which is what the early Christians realized in reading scripture, because you have to read it out loud a lot. It helps if it's chunked. down the
Yes.
column, which is why our Bibles are laid out that way. We've talked
Yes.
about this in the Mosaic Ark about
Like a
the
scroll, right?
Yeah, sure.
well for codex format, I've got a Bible, right? That it actually matters that it's in columns like this because your eye can follow
Mhm.
down the page for reading
Right.
out loud better. And
Yes.
that
Yes.
format is in fact an oral format. It's like here's a script
Mhm.
for you to read out loud.
Yeah, and your poems, I think they're lovely, and I have one of my favorites. It's very much like watching, like reading a scene that's been put on the page specifically to allow the reader to see what's going on in that particular period of time in Christ's life, and I love that.
Let's read some poems.
Oh,
That's a case.
must we?
Yes,
Must we read one of my poems?
Casey.
Oh,
So these are the first ones we have are from the book, the first book that Carl introduced me to, the Gospel according to Mary.
Mhm.
And Casey had her favorite that she wanted to start with.
I do. It's kneeling at the manger. And I absolutely love the insight at the end of this. I got chills reading it. It was really cool. So I'll
are you
go
going to
ahead and
read
read.
it?
Yes, I'm going to read it right
I
now.
will be pleased to
I
hear it.
printed it out
Yes.
for me.
Okay.
So, kneeling at the manger, staffs at their sides, hushed, mouths agape, reeking not of frankincense and myrrh, but of linseed oil, sulfur, pitch, and tar. These rough men stare, stunned by my son's birth, shocked and amazed, gazing at him. Their faces, though I recognize, they're the providers of the paschal lambs at Passover for the temple. They breed and they take from the ewes their firstborns to bleed and suffer, sacrificed to atone for Israel's sin. But when their shepherd eyes meet mine, I see on their adoring faces a glimpse of mute surprise, some wonder. In an eyebrows rise disbelief, while something in their furtive sidelong glances causes me to further ponder more. For they have been trained to know a sacrificial lamb when they see one.
Thank
Oh,
you.
I get chills.
Well, that fulfills the second prong of why I write.
The chills.
Yeah.
No. For people to be inspired by an image or a scene.
Hmm.
I had two or three people. This was first published in the Christian Century, a Christmas poem, some years ago, and then it was in here, obviously. I had a couple of people almost exactly, Casey, say the same thing. I had a guy say, when I got to the end of the poem, that I read that they see one.
Yeah.
The hair on the back of his neck stood up. He said it overwhelmed him. I had a couple other people talk about the same thing, a goosebumpy feel, because there's a point there that it's called the epiphany. You know, we do the epiphany thing, you know, after, you know, for presentation of Jesus. So one of the things I like to do when I have a poem, and this is a carryover from when I would teach freshman composition, but also speech, you have to have an attention getter and a clincher. And I like for my attention getters and clinchers to be what I call bookends. I like for there to be something at the beginning that gets referred to at the end, and something at the end that makes you want to go back to the beginning. And this is one of those, I think, kind of a sneaky little poem because, you know, it's a little nativity, it's a little cute thing. Mary's baby Jesus, you know, the shepherds show up, big deal, big deal, big deal, you know. The other thing that I try to do in my poetry is to make it new, if I can. Give it some new insight, give it a new thing. You want to know where this poem came from? I got
Yes.
the idea for this. I was sitting in a Sunday school class. I'm an adult. I'm 35, 40 years old. I'm sitting in a Sunday school class in the Boston area, and it's Advent season. And I'm thinking about, I grew up in both the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church till I was 14. So I'm the poet hybrid here. I feel like I have the best of both worlds. I have the Protestant take and the Catholic take. And so for me, so I'm sitting in this Sunday school class, and they're talking about this, and I'm reading, I've got my Thompson Chain Reference Red Letter Edition Bible. It weighs about 35 pounds. I don't bring it with me out to the country because it weighs so much. But that's my go-to open Bible on my desk wherever I am at home. So I've got this open, and I'm going along. I'm listening. And they were talking about the shepherds. How cool would it have been to be the shepherds, you know, to go there and be the first ones to see baby Jesus? And so I'm flipping through my the concordance part, and I saw somewhere that they said that there were special shepherds in outside of Jerusalem. I mean, Bethlehem. That they were the ones who were given the opportunity to pick the best lambs.
Oh, wow.
Awesome.
And
Yeah.
because they got the highest price for them. And so they were known to be the best shepherds with the best lambs. And so they would take their 12 lambs and they'd get the best price for them because they knew what would be a good sacrificial lamb.
Oh,
So in my little head, I went, well, what if those 3 shepherds were the same ones who picked the sacrificial lamb? And then that was the what if. That's the what if question. That's what started the poem.
And the best shepherds recognize the best shepherd too.
Exactly. What if the best shepherds who knew the sacrificial lamb when they saw one, they went to go see this baby and they're looking at the baby and all of a sudden they're like,
yeah.
And the mother,
yeah.
And the mother looks at them and she puts 2 and 2 together in her head.
That raised eyebrow, it really puts you right there. She recognizes the recognition on their face.
They're like, wait a minute, this is a special baby. So anyway,
yeah.
So that'll answer your questions the way I sometimes get an idea. But it also subscribes to the notion of if you're a writer, you're always at work. I wasn't sitting in my Sunday school class just kind of going, oh, when is this over, man? I can't wait to
Right.
I was sitting there and I had my antennae up and I knew, even though if it wasn't in my desk at home, you never know. I would try to tell my students, you never know. You never know when lightning will strike. Usually it strikes when I'm sitting in my office, when I'm opening up this book and flipping through it, because I've already written a new poem or 2. And so I'm looking around to do something else. And I come across that John chapter 4, 18 to 28, whatever, of the Samaritan woman. I'm like, I never thought of that before. So that's where I get the ideas. Now, I've been doing this for a long time. So it's like Pablo Picasso. One of the apocryphal stories for him, I learned my creative process was my dissertation on the creative process. So I want to know what made him tick. What was his creative process like? So one of the things I learned from him is occasionally when he would be sitting in a cafe or something, someone would come up and say, oh, Pablo, yo quiero dinero. Can you give me some money? He was like, get out of here. And if they persisted, so what he did one time, the first time he did it, he probably was sorry he did it. First time he took a napkin, picked it up, borrowed a pen from a friend, put the napkin down, signed it.
Said, here you go.
Here, go sell it. Get out of my.
Do something useful.
I'm not making that up. I read that. How did he do that? Did he go, okay, just a second, let me think. I'll sell it. There's a napkin. What? It took him like 15 seconds. Why did he do it in 15 seconds? Because he'd been doing this for a long time.
Right.
So one of the things that helps me, but doesn't help new writers necessarily, I've been doing this for decades. So that when I wake up in the morning and I'm kind of doing my deal and I get an idea, I don't have to, I don't have to go, oh, what's the format? What am I going to do?
Right.
So this is a brand new poem I wrote this morning. Proof positive, brand new. Okay. Proof positive. I give myself 1 page. I know how to start it. I know how to finish it. I know what goes on in the middle. I know what I'm looking for. I know what I'm thinking. I'm in the zone. You Rachel, you mentioned being in the flow.
Right.
I like it. I'm in the flow, and I know I'm going to be here. I'm not going to be here for 30 minutes and then I have to go play tennis. I'm here till noon. My wife knows this. She, does her stuff around the apartment here. We're in a little tiny 700 square foot apartment. Yes, but it's okay. So she does her little thing. She knows about noon, I'm done. I mean, my creative juices are pretty much done for the day. Later in the day, I might read something. I might write some prose or whatever. So I know I have that time, so I can relax. I don't have to. I'm not on a schedule. I don't get paid per word. So in fact, poetry doesn't even pay the postage anymore. So.
Well, so
we know.
Just going back to now. Wait, guess how many footnotes I just made as you were talking. 1, I can go look up your dissertation. I'm curious, just thinking about the process.
Yeah, sounds really good.
We've been learning that as we've been writing. So we only right now write in iambic pentameter because
Okay.
That's what we do, right? We started with Alexander Pope because he writes brilliant iambic pentameter. When you were saying you had your 4-line poem, um, I am his master's dog at Q. Pray tell me, sir, whose dog are you?
Yeah.
on the collar of the dog in the
Yeah.
garden, and I'm like, yes. And I saw someone talk about, you know, where poetry becomes useful, right? Someone made that a joke of that with a picture of our vice president. Right? It's like, I am his
Did
master's.
they?
Yes, they made the
Oh,
joke
I
of like
gotta see that.
whose dog is JD, right? Um, that we started with Pope and we started with iambic pentameter just to like we needed the backbone skill to
Sure.
be able to do this. And certainly now that we've been doing it for several years now, 5 years almost. Wow, we have a lot
Wow.
of you know, daily, not absolutely daily iambic pentameter, but 4 or 5 days a week, right?
Hmm.
I mean, you know, one, I hopefully all our poems scan a lot better now than they used to,
Right.
and that it just but also we've been trying to make sure that we don't fall into using the same tricks over and over, because you can get the academics who learn to write like you're describing. It's like, I know how things starts, I know how things ends, I feel the shape of the argument.
Mhm. Yeah.
To be able to do that without making it stale, so that you're saying you're also trying to find the surprise in it, that these two things are very challenging. And I think people, I'm just thinking about that out loud, right? They worry that it's always going to end up stale if you follow the form, and don't realize that it never becomes fresh if you don't follow the form. It's the kind of like, oh, I need to do free form, so I don't want to like write the 5-paragraph essay because everybody writes 5-paragraph essays and that's what it has to look like. That you've proven for us both of these things matter, right? You need to write in the structure, in the frame that you use, and be constantly willing to test the frame and find how it can still surprise.
Yeah. Clearly, the poems in Lost Parables of Jesus, they're not one pagers.
Right, right.
You know, they're 4, 5, 6, 7. So there's a part of me. I'm very flexible and bendable. You know, I'm the Shel Silverstein, the used Chicago writer, the amazing bendable, foldable man. You know, he writes
Right.
that. You got to be able to be, or as I like to say, don't be rigid, be liquid. You know, don't get yourself all balled up where you whatever. Um,
But on the other
the
hand, I'm grateful that you said, you know, how did say again what you said, you have a beginner and a what I think of it is the reincorporation, right? You have to get the things on stage, and then
yeah,
it's the reincorporation at the end that gives the meaning. And
yeah,
I actually got that from Keith Johnston on improv storytelling, but that you have, we're always trying to make sure we get everything on stage, you get things set up. And I know that as a historian, that's what I need to do. I need to introduce this character to you, but then significance comes out of the closure that you brought to it at the
yeah.
end, right? And that your poems are doing that in this really tight form.
Yeah. Well, that's the way Casey read it too. I mean, at the very end, of course, I knew to go back to the beginning, you know, because there's what I call it. It's called an attention getter.
Attention
You know,
getter.
like when they did, that's what I call it, the attention getter. When you do a intro to speech comm, you teach the students to have an attention getter. And so the first thing they say is, in this speech, it's a statement of intent. In this speech, I'm going to teach you how to earn $1 million a day for the rest of your life.
Now you have their attention, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody's like, really? You know? Then at the end, you're honor bound to have a clincher that refers to that in some way. Yeah.
Okay, so what's the attention getter in this one?
Uh,
Is it
I,
the title, or is it the
yes, yes. For me, most of the titles are the first lines of the poems.
okay?
That starts the poem.
So you have to
So
have
that's
exactly, and that's, I mean, the sort of what what I know in writing is it can take enormous amounts of effort to get that right opening, right? And of course,
yeah,
and if I'm sorry guys, but if you're writing on a Substack, you need to hear this. Don't just like decide that you're going to start wittering away and then have us keep reading. No, it needs to be right there. In the opening phrase, otherwise we're
Yeah.
not going to keep reading. Your
Yeah.
job as the writer is to go through all of the notes and all of the layers until you find that perfect opening, but you won't find it unless you've gone through all the layers and layers and layers of Wittering, and then you know what it is.
Well, you just need to grab them and say, look at this.
Right.
Right.
But you get
Yeah.
you get better at figuring out what that grabber is.
Mhm.
But copywriting, another of our great inspirations is Dorothy Sayers, who I think is
Yeah.
an absolute genius, but she spent a decade as a copywriter in
Mhm.
advertising. So, she had a lot of practice. It's like,
Yeah.
how do you get their attention with the opener, right? And then
Well,
fulfill the promise.
Well, and in journalism, that's called the hook.
Yeah.
Your lead sentence, your lead paragraph or one sentence has to be, back in the day when I used to teach those classes, should be between 15 and 22 words. That was it. And the briefer, the better. And if it bled, that made it bleed even better.
Please tell us how to do this. We need to sell our poems.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
At least.
But
Well,
the other,
actually, we need to sell them in the primary way of just getting people's attention so they'll read them.
well, it doesn't, it's not Harry Potter. When I have a new book come out and people say to me, you have a new book out? And I'm like, yeah, it's poetry. It's not Harry Potter. J.K. Rowling's not going to have
Hey,
any
some of
press
our
release.
early practice poems were on J.K. Rowling. So there, we did early.
Oh
practice
yeah, you
poems.
wrote a great one
By
about
J.K.
that.
Rowling,
Yeah.
one
Oh,
that
that's wonderful.
if only we could get her attention with it, because it's about the current like kerfuffle that she's in. But anyway, and we wrote it 5 years ago, so we're also prophets. If you're paying, and that's like Carl, if you're paying attention all the time,
Yeah.
and making notes and seeing things all the time, you have this prophetic ability because you're actually like just paying attention to
Yeah.
what's going on, and then sometime later, everyone's going, "Oh my gosh, this happened," and we're like, "Yes, we saw that," but only because we were watching.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so tell us how to make those hooks, those attention getters.
Okay. All right. The other thing that for me, it took me a while to learn is give the reader something to do.
Hmm.
That's what that title does. Kneeling at the manger. What? The reader should be going, kneeling? Who's kneeling at? Well, wait a minute. Manger is capitalized. That must mean something.
Hmm.
Now, for those poor people who don't know that Jesus was born in a manger, I'm like, too bad. You should have gone to Sunday school.
You need some
you would've-
context to be pointing to. Yes,
That's
memes.
right,
The memes
So
don't
I made-
land unless you know the reference. Which
So
I wonder about
admit-
that meme about, I am his master's dog at Q. If they'll get it, if they don't know that line, right? Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. Speaking of footnotes, my wife often says to me when she reads one of my poems, and she'll say, you need to put some footnotes at the bottom of the page. And she knows my response is, Rhonda, I am not T.S. Eliot. Forget it.
Oh, come on. His footnotes are jokes, right?
I'm not going to write a 20 line.
No, his footnotes are further misdirections. It's
45 pages of footnotes at the end. Give me a break.
No. His footnotes are part of the poem. You need to go reread his footnotes. Anyway.
Well,
okay, kneeling at the manger, and it's this it's the action, it's the puzzle of the capital.
Yeah, it's the puzzle account, and then it's about description. The 4 ways that you tell a story. I'm also a prose writer, and I taught prose writing classes.
Mm.
The 4 ways that you tell a story are narration. You have somebody who tells what's going on. You have action. You have somebody doing something. You have description, and you have conversation. Give them something to do. Those are the 4 things that make it work. And if you don't believe that, pick up a copy of Great Expectations by Charles Dickens and read any page. And sometimes in one paragraph, he does all 4 of those things.
Mhm.
We used to take students to London every fall for about 20 years or so. We had a London semester. So one of the classes that I taught was British literature, and Great Expectations was one of the books that I taught.
Mm-hmm.
We did all kinds of Dickens stuff. And I learned that Dickens was what really made it work for him. On every page, he would use those 4 tools. And so when I would teach a prose writing class, and when I helped my son, who's actually a better writer, he's a better writer at 40 than I was at 40. He writes space Western science fiction.
Cool.
That's what he does. He has 2 books, Adam and Go, Trinity. He has a trilogy. He's working on the 3rd book. You can get him on Amazon. Little pitch for my son here,
Very good.
And so when he was writing these books and stuff, and has been writing ever since he was a little guy. So as his first book was awful. It was 600 pages, went nowhere. I said, Zach, start something different. So it's actually kind of a Firefly thing. It's that kind of, genre, subgenre science fiction. And so as he began to write, I sat him down. I said, Zach, you want to be a good writer? Read this chapter by Dickens, and then we're going to talk about conversation, action, narration, and I put it before. Anyway, I did it in the wrong
Narration,
order.
description, action,
Action,
conversation.
conversation. They're all the sunshine things. So he read a chapter, and I said, okay, let's go back. I told him those 4 things. Now go back and reread them. Mark all the passages that are one of those 4 tools. That's how he learned to write really good. His writing is really very good. A friend of mine, she gave him a copy for Christmas. Her husband a copy for Christmas. He opened it up. He read it in one day.
Nice.
He loved it. 240, 250 pages. Like,
So
That's a good
why
story.
do you need the 4, right? So because
it's a balance. It's the balance.
Thinking about, because I think when we're writing we're writing a story in a poem. It's
Yeah.
epic or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I'm thinking it's like, we have to do, I need you to break down what you mean by narration, but action, obviously things actually have to happen, otherwise
People are doing
you're
something.
doing something. Description
People
is
are
you're
doing-
creating a setting, and the conversation is I mean it's
It's the dialogue.
right.
Yeah.
It's critical because it's the way you show the interior of the characters. So
The narration moves it forward,
Okay.
moves the events forward, moves them forward. Okay.
Would you say you use narration sparingly?
You have to decide. Here's why you use all 4. If you don't use all 4, are you listening down? You end up writing like Henry James.
he's all description. No,
Seriously. You have
I can't read
3
Henry
pages
James.
of description
Okay.
of the food on the table.
No.
I know what you mean. That was the automatic, like my brain is shutting down. I don't want to read another page when
I
I
know.
would come across a book like that when I was studying English in college. It was pretty brutal. So I do understand what you mean.
Yeah. Remember, at the end of his career, Henry James heard about a writer called Ernest Hemingway. They could not have been more diametrically opposed. Henry James wrote pages of description, then pages of conversation. His paragraphs, he had a whole page of one person talking. Hemingway was bouncing back and forth. I left a glass of water over here.
Okay.
Yeah, it's. I think what it does is it keeps your attention. You grab it,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it keeps your attention.
It keeps, and today's readers really need more imbalanced. They need to be moving here, moving there, and seeing something. As you said, the description really carries the day, but 2 pages of it, you're like, okay.
Yes.
So anyway.
Well, it's the way your brain works, isn't it? When you're communicating with the world around you, you're seeing it, you're smelling it, which is the lines of kneeling at the manger. You're talking about how things smell. Well, it doesn't smell like this. What? What do you mean? So there's a smell, right? And then the next line is it does smell like this, and
Yes.
so it's activating that part of your brain that remembers smells. So you're activating several different parts of your brain at the same time as you're reading this. So it does grab your attention.
And the other thing that I try to do in a sneaky way is throw in, I forget who the first person was who was talking about, how you approach putting, he didn't use theology, but he talked about doctrine or dogma or something, So one of the things that I also try to do, I'm kind of a sneaky guy, is I'm throwing in aspects of theology, of doctrine, in the middle of the poem. Mary says, oh yeah, well, they picked them to atone for Israel's sin. Where'd that come from?
Yeah.
Yeah. And what does
But
that
it's a
mean?
one line.
Look it up. Yeah.
It's a one-line thing. It's almost a throwaway line that makes but that's what leads you to the end. That line in the middle of the poem, the Paschal lambs at Passover, that's a description of what Jesus, the baby, is going to be all about. And they're going to bleed and suffer, sacrificed to atone for Israel's sin. So really, this is a poem about atonement. I mean, you could be teaching this in a theology class, So that's one of the things I think I try to do in a sneaky sort of way, is I preach and teach without being obvious about it, to help people understand. And again, if you if you didn't go to catechism and you didn't learn about atonement, well, too bad. Should have gone.
Right. Or frankincense and myrrh, right? So you start with
Yes,
that, right? So that it's the preparing the dead king's body for burial.
exactly. Very good. You're making that
Yeah.
connection. It gave you something to do to think about that, because the things that the healing ointments and the balm that Mary was putting on Jesus' body,
Hmm.
she's going to do again in the tomb after the
Right.
deposition. Those same ointments, only a little more aloe and some other kinds of things as well to preserve his body, which, for those of us who know the story, we're like, yeah, that's not necessary. It's not going to need it. Don't need to preserve it.
Okay, so that's a
Yeah,
nice.
don't.
I get to read the poem I wanted to read,
Okay.
which
All
is
right.
After His Death.
Oh, yes. Yes, yes, yes. One of my favorite poems, too. You're getting all my favorites. Way to go.
After his death, when I first read in his memoirs, the word became flesh, I thought of his tattoos, and the first time I discovered them. As I cleansed his body with the soothing oils and preserving ointments in preparation for his ultimate rebirth. The first, on his right bicep in blue Old English, outlined in black and quotated, "Born to raise hell." The second, inside his left forearm, vibrant in green and red, depicted a writhing, hissing serpent impaled upon a stake. And the third, over his breast, a pink Valentine's heart with jagged red edges broken in two. On one half, the black, bold capitals M-O-T, and on the other, H-E-R. So that there, I'm going to cry. So that there, even there at the last, I saw, as I tore the white linen into strips still again to wrap his body, he was mystery and discovery, just as in the beginning, until it was finished. Or was it? I wonder if he was, yes, and always is and ever will be, mystery and discovery for me, the enigma unto revelation.
Beautiful.
A very stately, beautiful reading. Thank you, Rachel. That was
It's
lovely.
hit so many things. My footnotes.
Okay.
The tattoos. I mean, I've actually done a number of. I have 4 myself.
I read that somewhere. I
So
saw that.
oh, here I have an angel on my shoulder, right?
Appropriate.
Which is part of another one that's on my back, which is the Trinity, which is from a manuscript, 14th century manuscript called Rothschild Canticles, which we just bought a facsimile of for our special collection. Anyway, I think about tattoos written on flesh, right? It's like and of course all medieval manuscripts are written on flesh because they're written on the
Yes.
animals. They're
What animal would that be?
well, they're cows and calves, and some are lambs, but I think most of them are cows and sheep.
Yes.
Actually.
The most special ones, though.
The most special ones are on calves, on the vellum, right?
Really?
The cows. But they're all, I mean, we just had a conversation briefly in the Telegram chat this morning about pigs, right? And whether or not
Yeah.
the monks in Clear Creek Monastery have their own animals. And yes, they have pigs and cows, and there's a monk who takes care of them. All of it's like she finding his tattoos on his flesh. And for me, that's just that this is beautiful cascade of. Then you go into she actually talking about the script that they're written in and so forth. So you are thinking of every book, every gospel, every Bible written in the Middle Ages, written on flesh, which is his flesh.
Mm-hmm.
So you are medievalist because we think about those, and that Mary is learning who she is as she cleans his body, which is just absolutely exquisite. The by the end she's making swaddling clothes for him.
Yeah.
This kind of beginning end folding is, of course, the essence of medieval exegesis, that they're constantly showing the way in which, Genesis is fulfilled in Revelation, that the birth, that Christ's death is fulfilled in his birth, that all of that winding. And so you get that beautiful image of her unwinding, uncovering his body to then cover it again. And so that she ends with that beautiful, what is it? The enigma to revelation, mystery discovery, that veiling. And the image on my back, the Rothschild Canticles have a whole series of Trinitarian images that are all about the veils showing and concealing the bodies, and the revelation of persons. I can keep going, but I mean, the blue Old English born to raise hell, right? So he's the biker, right? He's going to in fact, at the moment where she's cleaning his body is there raising hell, because he's in the
And that's what he was born to do.
and he was born to do that. Yeah.
Not R-A-I-S-E.
R-A-Z-E. Yes.
It's R-A-Z-E. And for those who say, I'm not sure you're using, but is there anything more ambiguous than throwing that word in there?
Well, and the rhyme, the English has, the beauty of all of our complexity of phonemes and pronunciations and words that do and don't rhyme. We're constantly worrying about this in our poem, because some of our rhymes, I think, are Spencerian, and they're it's an I rhyme. Is it which pronunciation should we use? But they're for constantly, as your poems are, being made aware of the language in which we're trying to express this, which she's saying blue Old English. Right? Why blue, right? It's black and blue, but in blue Old English, outlined in black, born to raise hell. I don't understand why it's blue.
When his body was horribly beaten.
Yes.
And when you are bruised, the welts at first that come up tend to be the blood comes to the surface, and it's reddish, purple, and whatever. But after a while, that, when I would, not that I did, but I occasionally got into little fights when I was a kid, and I got a black eye. I didn't get a red eye. I didn't get
right.
I got a black and blue eye. Of course, 2 or 3 days later, it was black under here and blue over here. And I come from, in my family, my father beat us. So I have a lot of, he was an alcoholic. Fortunately, he didn't live with us very much at all. We were happy when he didn't. So sorry to be all hung down, brung down, slung down here. But anyway, that's the thing. So I know about bruises. I know about being beaten. And at first they're kind of red, but they turn to be black. People say, oh, he beat him black and blue. Mm-hmm. They didn't beat him red and yellow. They didn't beat him pink and green. They didn't beat him in, wicked colors. They beat him black and blue. And so that was, for me, that was underscoring the nature of how badly his body was just abused.
Right.
And the mother had to see it.
She had to see it. Yeah.
She had to see it. And for her, I can go on about this, about how you creative process. I was sitting in church, sitting in a Protestant church. Pastor got up and said, today I'm going to be reading from the book of John, the New Testament. I'm going to be reading from John chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was flesh. At that point, I left the building. I did. Because I said, what if there were words on Jesus' body?
Mm-hmm.
What would they be? Where would they be? Aww. Okay, so that, again, I'm sitting in church, but I had a different one of these. What the pastor said, I was gone. I wrote probably 95% of this in one sitting.
Mm-hmm.
My wife saw me, she was like, yeah, whatever.
They hit. No, it's the secret shame of the writer's notebook. I got to write it down now. And the thing is, it's not, if you miss writing it down, you feel it's lost, and it isn't usually. But the problem is that you write it down. You have to write something down so that it keeps the hook.
Yeah.
For coming.
So anyway, so that was where I got the idea.
Yeah.
And so it like Picasso wrote on the napkin, it just came. It really, I keep a lot of my original drafts to prove to people someday after I'm dead. They'll go, darn, he wrote 90% of this poem the very first time. Huh, how interesting.
Mm.
Okay. William Carlos Williams, as you may remember, wrote a poem called The Red Wheelbarrow. The Red Wheelbarrow. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow, glazed with rainwater, beside the white chickens.
Hmm.
I used to, when I was taught in Boston, and I was a part of a arts program in the city called Artists in the Schools. So we could apply for grant money, or teachers could, and I would go in and teach poetry. I got paid, whatever. But it was a good experience. I like being with junior high kids, sort of. Made me glad I was a college professor. Anyway, so I remember I used to use this poem because it was short and simple, and students could memorize it. Invariably, half the students would go, "That's a poem? Did he get paid for that?" Well, not much. He was a doctor by day, but he wrote poems at night, or he put off the side of the road. The thing about that is I heard him on tape say, I'm going to read this poem. Sorry, that's a William Carlos Williams. I'm going to read this poem that I hear has been used in teaching.
Didn't like that word, did he?
Yeah, he's like, yeah. Okay. So anyway, to quote Pascal Williams, this is a poem that has been used in teaching. I've used it myself. I used to use this. In fact, all right. Form and structure of this poem. Mm-hmm. You invoked the ghost of the 500-word, 5-paragraph essay.
It's a Ciceronian structure. It's classic.
It is. There's an introduction.
Right.
There's a first example, a second example, a third example, and a conclusion.
It's exquisite.
It's kind of sad in a way that it's not some kind of like, I shall now write a poem about Jesus' tattoos. Which how shall I begin? Let me think upon it. I've been teaching, freshmen come for forever, and I just that's how I did it. I just did it.
Right, because you knew the structure, but it's like
knowing
the structure is
and I knew it would work.
Art.
There was just I can't explain it. My dissertation, half of it was writing 400 pages on the creative process, analyzing mine, 200 pages on everybody else's, 200 pages on mine. And you either you can do it or you can't do it. You either have the recipe if you're a cook, the formula if you're a chemist, and the structure if you're a writer. I do this all the time. I do it every day.
Right, but I think it's like we're both teachers, right? And saying you have to. Actually, we talked about this. When was I talking about this? Some other time. That what you are when you I know it's like you submit yourself to the discipline. It's like you said some people can do it, some people can't. The people that can't are the ones that won't submit to the discipline.
Yes.
That won't actually. And I was doing another interview, and he was asking me, it's like, what would you tell people about going into academia? And I said, well, you become the servant of your field. You're the servant of like your discipline, right? My discipline is history. I have to be able to teach history. I have to surrender to the structures of knowing that it requires to be a historian and to speak for it. And you can't do that if you're always worrying about imposing yourself onto the material. You have to let become the voice for the thing that you're trying to show. So I think people don't get the art or the sport or the skill, the musical skill or something if they won't submit to the actual discipline.
So I asked the question. In fact, I've had a couple people really, really be unhappy with me because I desecrated Jesus' body by putting tattoos on it.
Oh, I loved it. The snake you gave him, he's the Draco Alchemicus. He's the poem. Yeah. He's the snake in our poem, which is the brazen serpent lifted upon the staff, impaled upon the stake, green and red hitching serpent. He's got the perfect tattoos. They can't be upset.
One of the persons is a poet, I won't mention his name, who accosted me, if you can, over the internet, saying, I will never read another of your poems. You have desecrated the body of our Lord. And I'm like,
I'm pretty sure the flagellation and the nails and the thorns and those kinds of things.
Exactly. When I read that poem, I thought about all of his injuries,
Right.
like being
Yes.
Yeah.
reimagined as tattoos, right?
Yes.
I have written you on the palms of my hands, right? It literally just been pierced through. It's a permanent mark there, like a tattoo. I
It's
get
a
it.
And in the
stigmata.
Sacred Heart
Yeah.
written mother. My goodness.
Yep.
Yes. And
Yeah.
it's in two
Henry
pieces.
Suso did that with IHS with the, stylus, right?
Okay, so I told you that one of the ways that I start a poem is I ask a question. So once I put tattoos on Jesus's body, who's next? If Mary had a tattoo, wow, what if Mary had a tattoo? What would it be and what would it be about?
Oh, that one's a powerful one too. I
Mhm.
too.
Yeah.
We may
So
not get to your parables. I promised the parables, and here we are.
that's
Can we
okay.
read I too? Can I read
Yeah,
this one? This is Mary's
yeah.
tattoo. This one's really powerful. I
Okay.
spoiler alert.
Please.
I too.
Spoiler.
Recently, while in San Diego, making the rounds of Point Loma Nazarene College, imagine that, a college, an entire denomination named mostly after my son's own hometown, and sitting in on their chapel services, looking for reminders of myself. Well, one day, I crossed the line over the border to Tijuana during siesta and slipped into a tattoo parlor to see about one for me. After all, my son, his very self, had tattoos. And after the time I first discovered them, there on his sacred but dead and oh so punctuated body, I decided too I should have a tattoo, at least one. And so I do have only one that now matches my own flowing gown of Monday morning blue, as always. What else? It's a list, actually. Really a series of numbers in a row. And blue, too, like the little line of the thin vein it parallels, along my wrist, on the delicate inside of my white as mother's milk forearm, where only I can see, when my sleeve slips back, slides away a little, to reveal that I, too, am a Jew. You guys get the idea. All of his poems do this to you.
Well, yeah.
Yes. And it's just so many layers there of that she's. I mean, it always seems it's talk about desecrating, right? It seems like to be completely pedestrian and prosaic to explain them. Come on, you're right not to want to put footnotes in, but that she's in the Nazarene College, so I'm assuming that's a Protestant
Yeah,
denomination,
that's actually the last college that my wife and I taught at. We
right?
retired from it. We took early retirement to live in Eastern Europe.
And then
And
spent time. You said you were in Krakow for some time, right? Which is where St. John
yeah,
Cantius came from. Which is where that church is. St. John
yes.
Cantius, that altarpiece showing him fixing the jug has an image of Our Lady, the Church of Our Lady in Krakow.
And why did John fix the jug? Because Jesus said, I will give you the power to do what I do. And John said, okay, I'll try that. And he put it back together.
Fix broken
So yeah,
vessels.
this was the uh
She didn't find herself in the images in that chapel, so
what?
she has to go to Tijuana, which is
Oh, well, it's just whatever. Okay. So when I was doing that art in the schools program, I taught in a school, and I was there for 6 weeks. I did once a week for 6 weeks, and so just one little vignette here. So I'd use this poem in class, and the teachers knew that I was going to be religious. You know, they're like, "Well, my department chair is going to be concerned that you're talking about Christian things." And whatever. Okay, anyway,
you're clearly doing what I do. It's like you get everybody upset. On the one hand, you get the
yeah,
Christians upset for talking about tattoos. On the
I know.
other, you get the academics upset for talking about Christ.
I know. So I used it one week, and I came back to the same class the next week. And when the class was over, one of the girls in the class, these were middle school, 7th, 8th graders, whatever. She came up to me and she was like, Dr. Winderl, I showed your Mary poem to my father. And I was like, cool. Yeah. Did he read it? Did you? I read it to him and then he read it. And you know what he said, Dr. Winderl? He said it's the most beautiful poem he's ever read.
Oh.
Mhm.
I didn't know at the time. She was Jewish, so was the dad.
Mhm. That's
And she
lovely.
said that he was showing that to all of his friends. He was surprised that this professor in college would write a poem like this. And for me, the irony is most people think of Mary as a Catholic icon,
Right.
you know, or she's in the Orthodox churches, you know, but she was of the house of David.
Hmm.
You know, she was of royalty. Royalty.
Well,
This is
good
another one of those.
medieval mystery, right? She's the bridge. And this
Oh,
this is the thing that all of my scholarship is about, the way in which the medieval commentators see her in the images of the Old Testament. She's the one that stands between. And
yes,
right, and there's a wonderful sermon by Amadeus of Lauzon, who describes her as standing between the two baskets, right? On the one hand the Old Testament, and on the other the New, and she's the one that makes the bridge. So in your poem, that's what she's doing, right? She
yeah.
needs the tattoo, and there's that list and the numbers on her arm hidden, but you know, I too. So it's the right tattoo for her to have.
Exactly. Well, it's and many people, and you probably both come across this, reference Christ's death on the cross as Holocaust. You know, the
Right.
noxious gray clouds that descended after he died when he said it is finished and he took his last breath. Those are the same clouds that hung over Auschwitz and Belsen, in my
Hmm.
mind. I referred to that numerous times there. You know, uh,
It's the same clouds that are on the mountain that when
yeah,
Moses is speaking, right? That these
just,
what you're trying to show people, that people want to feel like none of this mystery applies anymore
yeah,
because of modernity, and in fact you're constantly seeing the resonances if you know how to read
Mm.
through Mary, which is why
yeah.
this is the gospel according to Mary. She's the one that creates. This is what I've tried to show my scholarship on her, that she's the one through which you can see this mystery, because she's the window of heaven, right? It's like all of the medieval stained glass windows are
All
Marian,
right.
because the incarnation is shown through her.
This is her in her own, maybe subtle way, maybe not so subtle way, saying to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, I was there for everything.
Hmm.
Mm.
She is.
She was there for everything. Everything in here, she was there. She was there. Well, maybe not in Gethsemane, but right, anyway. Uh, but this is also a good poem where I get to showcase my poetic abilities. The rhyming,
Hmm.
the enjambment,
Right.
the alliteration, the repetition. Poetry is usually about repetition. The idea with poetry is there's a fine line between repetition and monotony.
Hmm.
So toward the end of the poem, I really kind of like these. You read them so well here. When my sleeve slips back, slides away a little to reveal that I too am a Jew. I mean, there's all kinds of rhyming going on there.
Right.
There's all
Mhm.
kinds of alliteration and assonance going on there. But my friend Horace taught me what to do. Hide the art.
Hmm.
Make it not call attention to itself. So for me, that's what I really work hard to do, is to make it so subtle that you're not distracted by the form, that it takes away from the function of the meaning.
Right.
Trust
It
me, I,
should. No,
I
we get it, because when
Yeah.
we're writing, we're often arguing over,
yeah,
you don't want sticky out words, you don't want fancy words, you want the right word in the right place.
yeah, yeah.
And
Right.
and
To resist the temptation to stick a word in there because it rhymes or the meters well when it's not the perfect one, or the other way around.
right.
Just
Yeah.
have to, yeah.
I mean, I paid my dues as an undergraduate, and even at Chicago, when I started making the changes. You know, I started reading Edwin Arlington Robinson. Why on earth did I don't know. I just picked him up.
Mm.
You know, I started learning to be more free. I mean, Cummings obviously helped me a lot. You know, all writers go, I think, through their Cummings phase. I don't know if they still do or not.
Mm.
But I went through that, and one of the reasons why, when I left Chicago, and I decided, I did my old forms of criticism with Wayne Booth. I don't know if you remember that kind of ordeal that some of us had to go through. You know.
Well, I've heard
But I
of
think,
him, but I did not encounter
okay.
him.
Anyway, but
But
what I learned,
when I got here, they were Joseph Williams teaching style through the Little Red Schoolhouse, which saved all of the business school students
Oh,
from
cool.
writing incomprehensible prose.
Well, what I learned about Booth and others, Stuart Tave and some of the others was, and especially Miller and James Miller and Stern really helped me understand. It's more important to choose the word for the meaning than for its sound or its fit
Yes.
in the metrical pattern
Mm.
or the rhyming pattern.
Yes.
Because sometimes you choose a second class word when you need a first class word.
Mhm.
And then, of course, the irony, when I look back at this, I choose all kinds of words because they had the good sound. When her sleeve slides back, slips
Yeah,
a
that's
little,
nice.
Right.
like I have to do a little of this. You know what this is?
Pat
Patting
yourself on the
myself.
Oh,
back.
patting yourself on the back.
I'm gonna
Say,
Nobody else
what's
would
he
do it,
doing
but
this
I
to his
figure
collar? Right.
do a little back
Well,
patting.
yeah,
There,
it's
you
like,
know?
will they notice? Right. Well, it's
Right?
like on the one hand,
Yeah.
you said, right, you want it to,
Yeah.
to be there and people not being conscious of why it works so well. But on the other hand, sometimes you'd like people to get it, right? To
Yeah.
see that
Oh,
that is the right word in the right place for
yeah.
exactly
You know
the
what
right
it is?
reason. I mean,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
sounds when we're writing with the Spenserian stanzas now, well, we start each practice with reading one of his stanzas out loud, and just to warm up, right, so that
Sure.
you're
Yeah.
back in
Oh,
the rhythm,
yes.
and then be patient because we do like a stanza each. Well, when we're in flow, right, we're managing a stanza a day. But even if we write it quickly, try to like stay with it for the rest of the hour, so that
Yeah.
you can find better versions of it, right? Is that we were last night we wrote fairly smoothly because we were figuring out things in the story, but then we had to keep rewriting it a bit, and it gets better, right? Because you keep finding that, okay, that's actually that little bit better word, no, that's a really big better word. The rhyme helps you find
Yeah.
them.
Right.
Yeah, we found some
So is this
nice words last night because of the rhyme that we needed to fix.
so is this like a group project? You guys have
Mhm.
multiple heads and hearts at work?
The
I
so
commend you
with
for that.
with
That's not
with
easy.
Draco Chemicus, it's more, it's like the stamina to be able to do something that we've been working on now for 3 years together.
Yeah.
And we started with 5 people in the group, we then went to 4, and now we're at 3. I keep reassuring them this is normal. In anything that takes a long time, right? Because you get people at the beginning who are excited, but it's not going to be the thing they stick with. Not all of us end up in grad school, right? It's like
Sure.
a lot of
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
into introduction, a lot of people at the next level. It takes a while to figure out exactly what discipline you're willing to go with. But for me, it's absolutely essential. I could not write this by myself, right? It's like the collective exercise and the patience and the it's like that rhymes, that doesn't, we've got to stop doing that, no, you can't say that, this is better, because
And when we've been working together long enough too,
right.
that's not a problem. There aren't really any egos involved because we trust each other. So that helps a lot.
Well, I
Well,
mean,
you trust each other,
for us, it's
obviously.
been important to you feel your ego. I mean, it's still, they're still there, right? And then you say, okay, back down, right? And say
Yeah.
what I really like. I mean, this will be funny for me because I'll be saying, no, it's right, in case you'll be going, it doesn't work, and I'm like, it's right, and it say it still doesn't scan. I'm like, okay, leave it for a minute. And then of course I calm down, or patience, right? Realizing she's right, it needs fixing, what do we do with that? And that kind of immediate critical feedback from each other is really important,
Mhm.
because otherwise you get to always you get too attached to that, oh, that thing, it came out perfectly, right? Well, no,
Yeah.
it's not perfect yet, it can be better, think it
Right.
again. Yeah.
But also Rachel's been directing the story, as in she's got she had the original idea, and she's got most of the ideas for where she wants us to go, and she allows us to contribute to that, but mostly she's like the head chef here in this wonderful thing we're making together
we,
in the
we, we
kitchen.
do have to have
Yeah.
like a plan and stuff. The thing is, I think,
Yeah.
no, it can feel like I know where we're going, but it's more like I have the feel for where we need to go, in the way
But
that,
that's important.
yeah. And then,
That's
but it
super
still
important.
surprises me, right? It's like I'll be saying, I thought we needed to do this, but if we force
Yeah.
it, it goes the wrong direction. But if
Well,
we're
see,
patient with it, it goes in the right direction. Oh, and that's where I meant it to go, but not in the way that I thought we were going to get there.
well, she has a very active subconscious as we're writing. It's like to tell
I'll
her, I said,
credit that. Yeah.
yeah, I can see it. I can see the wheels turning back there before she can. I'm like, okay, she knows where she's going with this. Let's see where it goes. Right.
Well,
And then we'll contribute to it. And okay, I see where she's going. And then we'll contribute to the story itself as well as the meter and the rhyme.
but what you really been able to commit to is being it's kind of a group zeitgeist or something going on here, which is
Yes.
how many films, that's how scripts come to life.
Mhm.
Rarely
hope so.
today are
Yeah.
films written by one person. You'll see that script idea, and then you'll see written by 3 different people, and then you'll see, you know, what. And to be honest, you've got script doctors. So you were talking about someone who was a script writer, you know, if you're a script doctor, you know, and there are benefits to that don't happen, I think, when you're in the ivory tower. I kind of like living in the ivory tower by myself, but my wife says to me sometimes, make sure there are no bats up there, would you mind? You know?
Bats in your belfry?
The bats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She said, make it an ivory tower, not a belfry. I don't want any bats up there, you know. Come down. You know, remember you're a part of this world too.
Well, this is when we started with the Alexander Pope poem. The first one is modeled on his Dunciad, so
Okay,
it's
yeah.
satire, and that one we didn't have as much practice working together, and there were bigger groups still, and so
It's huge.
it was 10 people to start with.
Yeah.
That we sort of group wrote the opening act, I guess, the first part, and then I made everybody pair off and go write the sub acts with the thought that it was like writing episodes in a television series or
Sure.
something, right? It's like
Right.
here we've got the
Yeah,
the main frame, and now you
Mhm.
write subparts that will be like the episodes in it. And that, but those paired writing, Casey was part of that. She's been the longest on this particular ride, right?
Yes.
And was writing about Hollywood too. The paired writing was a good sort of warm up to writing with then in the second book we wrote was with 7, and that was the 7 all together for the whole thing, and it's the kids poem, and I think that was really important because the sort of it had to move really fast and do more change up quickly to keep kids interested. When the bear bites the albatross on the butt, that then it's going to go. it's and feathers.
That was fun. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Feathers everywhere.
But we have been thinking about it in terms of poetry needs to be visual in a way that's similar to film, but
Yes.
that
yes.
you can't and then we also have artists illustrating our poems, that you can show things in the images that you can't write, but the writing needs to be very like show not tell constantly, right? Which is why I was asking about
Right,
the
sure.
narrator, right? Just like you don't want the narrator telling you what to think all the time.
Yes.
You want to show the action, and then we can see in the tattoos all of the other things that you wanted to say, but you don't have to tell us he's black and blue because he was beaten, right? It's
Yeah.
the delight in the unlocking of the image is there for the reader. So giving the reader something to do.
Yeah. Well, and as a teacher of writing, I would mention to students what they need to do is be able to write on 3 levels. You need to write on the lines, you need to write between the lines, and you need to read between the lines. And that goes same for a writer as well. So a lot of my stuff, as I said, I like to give the reader something to do. Some of them, they're kind of lazy. They're not so sure they want to do it. And I get paid the same whether they read my stuff or not. But for me, what works is when I'm able to give them something to do, because it makes it work for me. And the I Too poem has that kind of aha ending. There were hints there. I crossed the line to go down to Tijuana. There are references leading up to it. There's some kind of foreshadowing, whatever. Because if you're just writing on the lines, you might as well be writing for Hallmark. Greeting card poetry. Because Hallmark, you read it once, thank you very much, I love you too, bang, whatever. So you need to be able to slip something between. I used to use an example. They don't do this anymore, but when I first started teaching, students would actually write letters back and forth to each other. Some would be at home, some would be back at school, whatever, and they write letters back and forth. And I would use the example of sometimes you get a letter from your boyfriend back at home, and the letter is like da 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 da. It's really nice. I'm having a good time. Oh, by the way, after church the other night, some of us in the teen group, we went out and we went to Shoney's, we had whatever, and then a few of us went over to the youth pastor's house, and then I gave so and so a ride home, and I hope everything's going well with you. Well, when you look at that letter, I see stuff on the lines, between the lines, and beyond the lines. So you're there, you're with me, okay? We do this all the time. And maybe the writer was doing it consciously or subconsciously, intentionally or unintentionally. But that's what a good writer does. You give the reader something to do between and beyond the lines. Otherwise, you're just reading greeting cards.
Right, we have this expression that we use a lot when we're writing. Said when we reject something, said no, it's too on the nose. Right? You're pre-digesting the stuff for the reader. You don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so now we've warmed them up. We can at least give them the taste of the one that we put on the cover of the story, which is
Excuse me.
more Marian poems, but this is on the road to Jerusalem.
Okay.
And I know you wanted to do the Not All Women, but it's really long. So.
I'm available next week. So let me know.
But the thing is, I think giving them the opening one. You also said you wanted to do In Tres Partes, and I'd love you to talk us through that one because it's magnificent. There's so many layers here.
I'm glad we're recording this because I'm going to play this back once in a while when you say things like that.
You can make clips.
Yes, I will.
Okay, so would you want to read this one? So this one's a little bit longer, guys. So settle in.
So which one you want me to read?
In Tres Partes, yeah.
In Tres Partes. Okay. All right. A little introduction here. This is a collection of poems that is a spiritual pilgrimage. It follows other spiritual pilgrimages. I think I maybe sent this handout too about the stuff. I'm standing on the shoulders of Dante and Canterbury and Chaucer and the Canterbury Tales. They're spiritual pilgrimages. Okay. So what makes these poems very different for those who are still with us or look back at us, these are poems that are practically never on one page. They're not standalones. They're part of a narrative, it's a journey. Mm-hmm. It's a journey on earth, eventually to go to heaven. That's what Dante was doing in the Divine Comedy. That's what Chaucer was doing in Canterbury Tales. It was a spiritual pilgrimage. They were going to heaven, Canterbury, Jerusalem, whatever. Okay, and so all of these poems, with their ownership given to like Chaucer, all of his tales have a beginning, middle, end feel. Someone tells the story. Harry Bailey introduces it, tells the partner, "Okay, this is da 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 da." And the partner says, "Well, I'd like to tell a story about da da da," and he references the previous tale. And then he gets around to telling his tale, and that's the one that everybody likes because he insults Harry Bailey at the end. So we have the beginning that sets it up, and we have the tale, and then at the end of the tale, he insults Harry Bailey as the ending. So it's a nice, neat little episode. So the intention for all these were for there to be like little stories or episodes within episodes, okay? And advancing from, oddly enough, Galilee to Samaria into Jerusalem, whether it's the Inferno, Purgatorio, or Paradiso. It's all in the threes, very much in the threes.
In Tres Partes.
In Tres Partes is the beginning, right? And this is the prologue. Oh, you might remember Chaucer had a prologue, the general prologue. I am not shy about obvious allusions. That's what Chaucer called his prologue, a general prologue. All right. So anyway, so this is the setup. In Tres Partes, well, we're back to Latin. Do you think I liked Latin in high school?
No.
And in college, I studied on my own. That was when I did my dissertation. I would translate Latin before I started writing my dissertation. I had my 2 hours. I would translate Latin 15, 20 minutes.
Translating Latin is a good discipline for English poetry for other reasons that we can talk about. Carry on.
Oh, for sure. So, fancy title, In 3 parts. If you didn't take Latin in high school, too bad. Okay. In 3 parts, it's going to tell us. And this is Mary, always Mary, the narrator. Did that other forerunner, Jesus, Julius Caesar, first initialized as JC, in his own known world then stake his claim in Gaul, sent unto the Patres Romae, fathers of Rome? There's rhyming going on in those first few lines. Stake, claim, and other things, right? News of his kingdom come to be called, for no, he had the gall to proclaim, Veni, Vidi, Vici. I came, I saw, I conquered. While my son would in some simplex state in his inaugural proclamation of the kingdom to come that he was, is, and ever shall be, three in one, the triune, whole, complete, and entire. All right, I'm going to stop occasionally. Here's another example of
You're footnoting
document.
yourself. Stop it.
What? No, this is footnoting myself. Yes. I mean, the big deal with Jesus was he was wholly human, wholly divine. People still can't wrap their brains around that.
Right.
That's what Mary is saying here. He was complete. He was entire. He was whole. He was three in one. He's trying. Okay, I'll stop footnoting myself.
No, it's
Sorry.
funny. I'm just teasing you.
No, I can take it.
He had
When
the
he
gall
said,
to proclaim. You missed that one.
well, I assume you
It's
did.
spelled Gall, and of course, though everybody who did do Latin in high school and knows Gallia est divisa in partes tres is the pun here.
I know.
Yes. Okay.
I know. I saw Casey give a little wisp of a smile when I read that. I gave her something
Very
to do, and she did it.
educated group here. Okay.
You are very sophisticated, very good. When he set out that faithful and fateful, cruelest of Aprils on a pilgrimage to Passover be, as if wending their way to Canterbury, to visit a latter-day holy, blissful marcher. Instead, he and they, through the then-known world of the province of Judea, divided into its three parts, Galilee, Samaria, and Judea, wherethrough he must go to enter Jerusalem. There he would unite for time and for all eternity his kingdom to come. So from the shores of the Sea of Galilee, 'twas the next beginning when the word sallied forth, among whom his disciples, I too went, seeing him win their trust, hope, faith, and charity, as if the stories he told were tales to prepare the way to their unbelief and to in their understanding, so that some of those parables he spoke, they later enflesh in their memoirs, as if the very gospel. But the ones they forgot, those, the lost parables, I all remember and share with his latter-day followers. They come to know my son through these his revelations, seen through his mother's eyes, that others might realize and be wise, alike as when he first spoke of them. So you probably figured out by now, the colon signifies this is when Jesus talks. And it's all indented three spaces. So that's a little visual thing there. So this is Jesus telling the first lost parable. A certain man in a nearby country lived among three side by side, around about him, landowners who would devour that certain man and his land and all his children and all his servants, livestock, and even, yea, all his possessions. But that certain man avoided them. All three, when all together they were. No, not ever when all three were one, as at the village square. Nay, only when they were one alone with him. Then did he refute their malign dispute to dispossess him. Yea, instead, though, he turned around each one's wrath upon the other two, saying that their plot to overtake was for both the certain man and their odd man out. Thus 'twas what the certain man spoke to each man alone, by himself, singly, and 'twas sore believed by each. For each easily believed the deviltries of the other absent pair. So then the three warred among themselves, and thus they destroyed each other. For out of their self-doubt, the certain man played upon each other's guilt of evil intent, and singly, one at a time, he overtook his adversaries. And in the end, one out, for divided they fell, but he singly united stood, victorious over his duplicitous, yet even his triplicitous foe, fallen by divisive distrust by the one who lived in equanimity, though once so surrounded by enmity, but which he himself crushed with dignity and impunity. Therefore, in this manner did my son regale them in his regal way onto the crossroad of Jerusalem, so that along the way with ears and eyes they might hear and see his mighty wonders, words, deeds, and signs, glorious to behold. So this is the introduction. So between and beyond the lines here, for those of you who remember the Partner's Tale, for those of you who remember Omnia Gallia est divisa est tres partes, there were three barbarians who were walking across the plain, and Julius Caesar wrote about this. That's where I learned this when I was a sophomore in high school. He was walking across the plain doing his deal, and three barbarians saw him, and they came running after him. And he was like, 3 against 1, what do I do? Do I use my brawn or do I use my brain? So what did he do? He started running. And he ran fast enough and long enough so that the three barbarians eventually spread out. The faster one was running, coming closer, closer. Centurion looked over his shoulder, started looking like he was out of breath. But he waited until there was a big distance between the first one and the second one. He slowed down, and eventually he stopped, holding his chest. And when that happened, the first barbarian ran faster. As soon as he got to the centurion who caught his breath, was ready, went. And then he was like, oh. And then the others were like, you killed our friend. So they came running. Second one came after. He got like he ran out of breath again. You know why? What he was doing. He was saving his breath. And the other guy was running faster. Caught up to him, centurion turned around and went, killed him. Pulled the blade out. And the third guy came running going, yeah. And then he stopped. And he realized he was all alone. And the centurion put his sword in his sheath, killed him.
Mm.
In the Partner's Tale, you know this one. The three young riders go out to kill death. They're sitting in a pub. I'll try to speed this one up. They're sitting in the pub, and a friend of theirs is being taken to the cemetery because he's dead. And they're like, death killed our friend. We're going to kill death. And so they go outside the pub, and they look around, and they see some old guy, and they insult him, kind of like what happened in the Old Testament. Anyway, we're going to kill death. Where can we find death? Well, I think if you go out into the forest, you will see him sitting under a tree. So they go running out in the forest. They don't find an old man. What do they find? A bag of gold.
Yeah.
They forgot all about killing death. They're like, we've got the gold. We've got the gold. Let's party on. So they pick one of the guys to go back into town, get the party supplies, and then come back to them. So while the two guys are waiting for the party supplies, they're like, 2, 3. Let's kill him, and we'll divide the gold in two. So the guy who goes to get the party supplies, gets the wine, gets the bread, gets the whatever, passes by the apothecary, goes, poison. Poisons the wine. Back out. He goes out there, and the two guys do what they said they were going to do. They kill him. They're like, party on, drink the wine, and they die.
Found them.
So I gave some readers a lot to do in that beginning there. But what I'm helping them understand is the notion of revenge,
Mm.
plotting, threeness, planning, whatever. So, and what I used to tell students is this, like with Canterbury Tales, we would do the partner tale, and I would say, you want extra credit? Here's extra credit. Yeah, we want extra credit. We want extra credit. Go rent the movie A Simple Plan. Why do we have to write a movie? We don't have to write a movie. Go rent a movie, write 5 paragraphs on what you think is going on there.
Mm.
Simple plan. Plane crashes out in the woods. 3 hunters come on it. It's a UPS or some kind of plane, and the pilot's dead, and everything's spilled out, and there's a ton of money in there. All right. What an original idea. What is the
I wonder where he got it.
Anyway, okay. So there's a lot going on in here, but again, I'm trying to cross-reference that these stories are too good to be forgotten.
Mm.
Canterbury Tales, Julius Caesar's letters. This guy he wasn't that bright. He got killed by a bunch of people eventually, but he was a good commander. He was well educated. He knew how to rule. He knew how to win over all the senators and everybody. Maybe he had a little too hamartia or hubris, as we all know, from Latin literature and whatever. But these are stories that are too good to be forgotten. That's why they're standing the test of time. And that's why I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll use some of their ideas. I'll stand on their shoulders. You have to use a stepladder to get on top of Dante and Chaucer's shoulders, I'm afraid. So anyway.
Well, but it's also, I mean, we were talking about you have the hook and what I call the reincorporation, or the point.
Yeah.
And that our sense of meaning is always in that reincorporation. It's like the story that we thought we knew, we get shown something else about it, and therefore where a meaning arises. And you were saying stuff about writing on the lines, between the lines, outside of the lines, and everyone's worried about the AI lines right now, right? The large language model stuff. We've played a little bit with Grok writing poems to see what it does, and the thing
Really?
yeah, so we do practice things, and when we'd taken a break from finishing Act 3 to do the illustration descriptions for our artist, and so we needed to warm back up in iambic pentameter, and so we said, great, we'll write sonnets. What shall we write sonnets about? Oh, we started writing about the Trump's executive orders.
Yeah. The Gulf of America.
we got this idea from Stephen Fry's book on writing poetry. It's like, stop, if you're trying to learn the form, stop worrying so much about the topic to start with, and just pick something, right, that you didn't have content for. And so when we were doing these sonnets, everyone was worrying about the executive orders, and one with Casey and I had a big disagreement over was whether or not it's a good or bad thing to call it the Gulf of America. so we did some sonnets on. We co-wrote a sonnet too, right? You guys were getting a lot of like practical techniques here. Each of us wrote, and there are 3 of us, so you're in Trace Partey's works here too. We wrote 4 lines and then traded them out, and then wrote another 4 lines and then traded them out, and then we rewrote all the sonnets together. There were several, not just the Gulf of America ones, right? And then to rewrite that, we drop it into Grok, right? The large language model on X. And Grok is good at praise to start with. Oh, it's a sonnet. Oh, and I see what you're doing here. And then we're like, oh, great, rewrite it to do this, that, and the other. And what you can see it doing when it's rewriting things is it's got the line sense, right? Yeah. But even as we told it, write it with, I can't remember what else we gave it as instructions, right? It could not get out of the line sense. That's it, right? The large language models are working entirely with the meaning of the words in the syntax, but it can't. And the thing is, it's a big question in the sort of scientific philosophical conversation. If they're trained on that, there's no way to get access to all this other stuff that you were talking us through in order to understand your poem, right? Yeah. It's the reference of the other stories, it's the allusions, it's the sounds, it's the you can read the fake poems that Grok has written, or like it's fake images, right? We can tell it, make Trump cleaning up the I think we ended up with an environmental message in our
Yeah,
Gulf
we
of
did,
America
because he had
poem.
gotten rid of the paper straws
Oh yeah, the
thing.
paper
So we
straws.
put a whole bunch of stuff in
Polyfluoroalkyl
there.
straws. I mean, you really had to get that word in there, didn't you? And
I
it's
got it.
and it's scanned.
It fit.
So,
But it's to see what we posted this in our newsletter, right? Sonnets with Grok, to see what isn't happening when you're thinking all the poetry is a particular structure and
Yeah.
sounds, right? It's all of those other layers of references that Carl, I'll say it again so you can clip this out, right? Your poems are brilliant at, right? Which is you read it and they're all parables, right? It's like Jesus's parables are constantly, you can preach yet another sermon on them because every single time you tell them, they reference into new dimensions. So you're having Mary tell the stories in three parts, which are referencing your three models. Which, I mean, that's what our minds and our souls delight in.
yes.
It's the parable that points constantly to our experience outside of itself, to previous stories, all of those things, and that's why we should be writing poetry.
Yeah, Grok was fascinating because it had a very mathematical view. Like you said,
Yeah.
it could pick up, it correctly identified satire, but then we had to rewrite it over and over again. It lost even that because
Right.
it was trying to fit words in that they thought like plugging in numbers into a formula.
Right.
And
You can notice
you could
notice
tell.
the program doing that. And so everyone I mean, it's like our meta theme, of course, is, why art, right? And that I think, Carl, what you said at the beginning about, it's the moment of inspiration. You have to practice it there, but that art is giving us, our practice in this discipline is letting us tap into all of these things,
Yes.
like prayer, right? It's that
Yeah.
art. I mean, my Marrying the Art of Prayer book, right? It's the point is you have to get inside this practice to feel its structure, that then gives you access to this understanding and that catch in your throat, or that chill every time
Yeah.
that you're seeing something new.
Well, Casey might not know this, but I read. I don't have them here with me. Your book on Mary and prayer, and thought, 800 to 1200, and the first one was
From Judgment to Passion is the first one.
Judgment and Passion, whatever. I get ideas for poetry reading.
That makes my day.
How lovely.
Yes,
She-
handbooks.
So when I came back from Poland last fall, I had ordered Writing Christian Poetry, the book that
Or our
Rachel
little,
had.
yeah, that one my students did.
Mm.
My students wrote those
Yes.
poems.
But
Yeah.
the good part, I love the introduction. I read that like 2 or 3 times, and I sent you a couple of poems that I wrote based on things that you were discussing there. I love the one about
Nice.
the Anglo-Saxon, that the nominative and the accusative are the same form. I love that. The wood bore the sun bore the wood. I'm like, bang.
Yeah.
I wrote a really good poem about Anglo-Saxon. So that's where I get inspiration as well too. And when I was getting ready to do this today, I'm like, man, I wish I could go back home and get those books, because I could really talk about those too. I would have had to have a separate suitcase or whatever.
Yeah, well, you have to. You still have access to the practice.
Yeah, I know.
That's what matters. So yes.
So,
So I'd say, you guys, you got to read his poems, and we'll want to show people where to find them, and how to find you. But I hope everyone now understands why we were so excited to have you on. and the thing is, I think I am going to go look up your dissertation, because I can do that given my access to things like ProQuest.
No.
Yes.
Okay, you need to be warned.
You read my stuff.
Yeah, okay. So Neil Postman was one of my readers. You may have heard of Neil Postman. I got to be really good friends with him. Anyway, he was actually the person. Anyway, after I did my defense, I'm sitting on the hall, and whatever, he comes out, he sits down, pulls out a cigarette. Could smoke in those days,
Indoors.
Indoors. He's like, and I'd known him for he played basketball at Fordham. I played basketball in college. We talked about all kinds of things. So he said to me, so let me be the first to call you Dr. Winderl. And let me be the first to tell you that you were one of the most relaxed dissertants that I've had through whatever. Da, 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 da. And he said, and I know why you were. He knew he loved that. He said, I know why you were. He was best friends with my dissertation advisor and my program advisor, Carl Schmidt. He said, I know why, because you played basketball. You came prepared. You were in shape. Nothing we could do could unsettle you.
Very good.
You figured it out along the way. So anyway, but then the last things he said was, oh, Carl, the joke's on you. You wrote 2 dissertations, not 1. Here's what I did. So I wrote, the title of it's basically a creative process that produces direct experience literature. And what I did was I decided to investigate 2 things: how you write, how the creative process for writing, painting, sculpting. And then I focused on writing. And direct experience literature was basically just a fancy 3-word phrase, meaning literature that's based almost entirely on the experience of the narrator, but it's not autobiography. You'll be surprised to know there's poetry, there's song lyrics, there's stream of consciousness, there's all over the place. And I talked about my creative process. So Carl Schmidt, my dissertation advisor, said, I want you to keep a journal or tape record yourself. And I was like, I don't think I want to do that. Anyway, so I wrote the creative process part was like 450 pages, but then I wrote just the novel of about 1,000 pages. That's the second dissertation.
Oh.
Overkill.
I'm warning you.
Okay, so Robert has a question right now. Don't you feel the danger of too much reimagining in all of this?
Oh no, no, absolutely not. One of the things that I've said about direct experience literature, because somebody I heard this question from a bunch of people. Someone in the defense said, "Aren't you afraid you're just living in the past?" And I think he expected me to be like, "You're accusing me of living in the past." I was like, "No, actually, what I'm doing is I'm living through it." There's a big difference. Yeah. So anyway, the caveat lector, Rachel.
Hey, I know where to find you.
Be
So can
warned.
you, Carl, this has been lovely, and we promised, I did promise you, I said we could go over, but I also promised you that it would be,
No.
it would be about a certain length of meditation.
Get paid the same, right?
Well, in attention.
Yes.
Yes. And also one of the things that I try to teach, my students and my poetry group is, you have to start on time and stop on time, and that's where the magic happens, right? That you can actually and you said that when you were talking about, you get to noon and it's time to stop. So
Yes, that's right.
we're sorry, it's time to stop. I'm sorry to the audience, right? I will put links in the description under the YouTube, and I will also include anything else that you want me to link to in the newsletter that I'm going to write this afternoon after we finish. But where's the best place for people to find you and your poems?
They're available on Amazon, Goodreads. I don't know where all they are. The publisher, Finishing Line Press. If you have Amazon Prime, yes, you can get free shipping, maybe, or do multiple. I don't know, whatever.
That's you. You send me copies yourself.
Yeah, I do, because I get a 40%.
All of my books seem to be printed in the same place, which is, I understand, the Amazon distribution center outside of the city.
Yeah. Well, no, mine, I get 40% off for author's copies.
Thank you.
So the $20 book only costs me $12, or whatever it is. I get 40%.
Anyway, for those of you who want to enjoy reading them in your very own copies, you can get them on from all good booksellers and Amazon.
Yes. The other thing I often tell people, just Google my name in poetry. Go to Google. Go to
You're
poetry.
out there everywhere, is what you're
Stand
saying.
back, and you can read all the poems you want for free.
Wonderful.
Don't pay any money at all.
Wonderful. Well, we're so grateful for you to hang out with us in our salon for
I am
a little bit
delighted
of
to
time
be here.
Thank you.
and to share your practice with us. It was really
Thank you
really
for
beautiful.
letting me live my Pascal dream.
Talking about yourself. Okay.
I felt inspired in a different way this afternoon than I did this morning. So thank you for making that happen.
Thank you for
You guys are
joining
great.
us.
Guys are great. Thank you so much. Blessings.
God bless.